Listen, child. Listen close and let the story hold you beneath an eternal moonlight that remembers the names of things long after people have forgotten them. There is, the old folks say, a harbor folded into the crook of a gray coast, where lanterns make small islands on the water and the wind carries salted breath. Above that harbor the moon goddess keeps her silver watch. She is not fierce or distant. She is patient as tide and soft as the hush that falls when a door is closed on the day. Once, so the tale is told, she sent down a childlike being of pale fur and wide, wondering eyes. They called it the moon creature, for it came wrapped in a silver that smelled faintly of rain on stone and of the inside of a seashell. The first thing it knew was light. The creature was found curled in a crescent of kelp on the foreshore, small and trembling, as if it had been carrying a cold inside it. A humble caretaker, a figure who belongs to the sort of story that keeps no grand titles, found it at dusk. The caretaker wrapped the creature in a blanket that had the faint tang of chip smoke and lavender, and carried it home with the tide line in their boot prints. There was no claiming or naming, only an offering of warmth. The village watched with the silent curiosity of those who keep watch on harbor nights. From the first evenings, 3 small rituals shaped them. At dusk, when gulls folded their wings and the sky softened to a pale pewter, the caretaker put out a shallow bowl of warm broth and seaweed. The creature leaned over it like someone learning language by listening. It learned the taste of being fed. The second ritual was a single whistle the caretaker made, an old hollow sound that bent and rose like a question. The moon creature learned to listen for that exact note and would tilt its head, pupils unblinking, waiting. The third was the smoothing of a nest. Fingers spread over straw and cloth until the sleeping place carried the outline of the hand. Fingers smoothing the nest. The map of touch began to be written into the creature's body. Night after night, the same whistle bent the darkness back into the yard. The small rituals were not dramatic, but they were faithful as tide. Each repetition made the map of touch deeper. A hand on a warm chest, a thumb finding the hollow behind an ear, a slow, practiced breathing that matched the creature's own. The village kept watch in their way, women and men by their doors, children pressed to windows, old fishermen telling and retelling in low voices. They became a chorus of witnesses, not owners. In hearths and in the quiet between the nets, the story grew fingers that reached into people's sleep. The night the moon creature learned to rest its face against a human palm. The morning it hummed like a pebble rolled by the sea. The caretaker never called the creature a pet, never spoke of possession. They spoke of tending, of keeping safe. They taught the moon creature by touch and tone, not by commands. This was stewardship rather than ownership. Bowls left at dusk, a whistle given as signal, a nest smoothed before sleep. Those 3 acts, feeding at dusk, the single whistle, and the nest smoothed by fingers, were like small stones placed across a stream so that the creature might learn the way without having to know the map. There were quiet nights when the moon goddess herself seemed to bend lower, as if to watch the teaching take root. Shadows pooled and silvered under the eaves. The creature would lift one hand as if to catch moonbeams, and then rest it again on the caretaker's knee. The village would hum a soft cadence, a half-remembered rhyme that was not a song so much as a keeping of rhythm, a lullaby phrase, a breath between words. Sleep, and let the moon keep watch. Sleep, the night remembers you. The line would hang in the air like a light thread, and the moon creature learned it in the spaces between blinks. Time made the rhythm a grammar. The creature moved with a patience that was not slowness, but the steadiness of tide. It learned to wait for dusk, to answer the whistle with a small sound of its own, to settle when the nest was smoothed as though the pattern had been stitched into its ribs. The caretaker's hands became a map across fur and skin. A child in the square could point at the creature's chest and say, simply, "It knows the hand," and that was the whole of it. Bodies keeping memory when words are too blunt. But the world is made of necessary reckonings as well as tenderness. There came a time when the healers who watched from the cliffs, keepers of certain old rites, spoke softly together and gave counsel that a journey was needed. The creature, they said, carried something like an ache that would take the cool air of the open islands to ease. Or it needed to learn the ways of the tide, too, to remember the sea without fear. It is not dramatic in the way of stories of loss. It is precise and kind. A protective transfer, they called it, an absence chosen to give shelter to growth. So one evening, with Moon the same argent disk that had looked down on the first meeting, the caretaker helped the moon creature into a boat lined with straw. The whistle sounded once more, a round note that trembled over the water. Hands smoothed the nest until the creature found the impression of them. The map of touch, soft and present, held. The village gathered on the quay. Faces turned like a slow bank of shells. There were no goodbyes that break and scatter, only a steady pressing of palms to the creature's flank, an exchange of breath. "Go where you are tended," a fisherwoman whispered. The boat slipped into the pale lane the moon carved on the sea and was gone. Absence is a quiet thing. It gathers like dust in the corner of a nest. The bowl remained on the low step at dusk for weeks, cool and undisturbed. The whistle, once filled the night with its strange kindness, hung like an empty shape in the air until the caretaker tucked it beneath a cot in case the creature needed it in a dream. The nest kept its hump and shape, like a place left warm by someone gone only for a while. The village converted the loss into stories carried between hearths. The fishermen spoke of the soft scuffing of fur on a timber board. The children made small drawings of silver-furred shapes on scabbed paper, and the old told the tale anew, trading details like coins. They told it as one tells a map. Here is where the creature found sleep. Here is where the whistle would call. Memory became a chorus rather than a single voice. Night after night the moon watched, patient as a friend waiting at the foot of a bed. The refrain half-uttered in hearths rolled along the lanes. Sleep, and let the moon keep watch. Sleep, the night remembers you. It threaded through lullabies and mumbled prayers and the small prayers of sailors as they mended nets. Even the smallest child could mime the whistle with pursed lips, and that was comfort enough when the whistle itself was absent. Years, in their own gentle way, lay themselves across the harbor. The caretaker tended other small things too. Broken oars, a sprig of rosemary, the neat piles of driftwood that always assembled themselves near the gate. Sometimes in the long hush of afternoon, the caretaker would take down a blanket, smooth it with hands that had learned that ritual grammar, and let the empty nest answer their palm. They never grieved in a loud fashion. Their sorrow was the steady kind that plants a seed. They trusted the keepers on the islands and the council that had sent the creature away. Stewardship had taught them to make space for returning or going, for safety or letting go. Then, as the tale goes, on a night when the moon hung thinner and more slivered than usual, a figure came across the water. Lantern glow bobbed like a small herd of will-o'-the-wisps as the boat grounded upon the shingle. At first, the village thought it was a tale told twice, a memory pressed back over itself. But the silver outline that stepped ashore carried the same stillness, the same slow breathing in and in that the foremost watchers had come to recognize. The creature had grown not into something other, but into a fuller shape that still carried the child's light. It moved with a steadier gait, its shoulders wider, its hands larger and gentler, but the map of touch the caretaker had made was still there like a seam. Recognition arrived like a tide. It is not a single sound or a shouted rejoicing. It unfolds in the way a hand finds a familiar stone in a pocket. The creature paused at the edge of the yard and sniffed the salt and the smell of lavender and chip smoke like someone reading a page they had studied before. A tentative finger lifted, testing the air. A palm found the caretaker's knee and rested there as if it had been resting there all along. Breath matched breath. The heartbeat beneath fur, solid and slow, was a proof enough. No words were needed. The community that watched from the windows held their breath the way people do when they do not want to disturb a promise being kept. They embraced in the slow grammar of bodies. The caretaker's hand across the creature's back, the creature's forehead pressed to the hollow of a shoulder. It was the kind of touch that carries history, not a sudden flood, but an unlatched door letting in a steady light. The whistle rose then, not as a calling, but as an answering. The note wrapped itself around the reunion and made it visible as a ribbon might. Nearby, someone began the lullaby half in a whisper. Sleep, and let the moon keep watch. Sleep, the night remembers you. The words seemed to settle the creature like a blanket settling over an animal that has roosted in many places and finally knows the contour of a single hearth. There was rejoicing, yes, but also a gentle resettling. The healers and keepers who had advised the caretaker came ashore and spoke with quiet authority about boundaries and the needs of the creature. It was agreed that the creature would not return to the small, closed rooms of a house forever, nor would it be left to roam without care. Instead, the community fashioned a life that honored both the moon creature's need for the open tide and the well-rooted quiet of human touch. A sheltered garden by the cliff edge, a low stone outbuilding that opened to the sky. Bowls placed at dusk by the caretaker and sometimes by others whose hands learned to be gentle. These became the new rituals. They were careful to make room for the creature's autonomy so that the reunion would not become a new form of holding. They were watched over in a ring of gentle hands, keepers who kept a close and careful watch. The village learned again, in the doing of daily small things, that protection does not mean possession, and that the heart can make room for both freedom and the safety of being known. The moon creature grew used to going out with the fishermen sometimes, to follow the tide line and to know the slope of kelp underfoot. But always it came back when the whistle sounded and the nest smoothed itself into shape beneath waiting hands. The map of touch expanded not by erasure, but by addition. New places to rest, new palms to remember. Years later still, the story moved inward, into the soft rooms of childhood. One evening, a little one, who had never seen the creature as it was when first found, tugged at the caretaker's sleeve and asked simply how it had come. The answer was not a single explanation, but a telling. The tale of feeding at dusk, of a whistle that called, of fingers smoothing a nest. The three rituals spoken as if they were a recipe for keeping, not owning. The children learned the lullaby in a game, and the line settled in their mouths easy as bread. Sleep, and let the moon keep watch. Sleep, the night remembers you. The refrain was said then and later still, always carried between hearths like a warm shawl. In the years when the moon creature became part of the harbor's heart, storytellers took the tale farther. Fishermen would add a small flourish about the night the creature sang with the gulls. An old woman would say that on winter evenings the creature would press its large, careful face to the window to watch the young ones asleep. These were not grand changes, but small embellishments, like new stitches on an old quilt. The legend became less about a single event and more a promise. Steady presence makes a path back home. The moon goddess, ever the patient witness, continued to pour her light on the waters. That same silver light held the memory of the first meeting and the later return and all the small, repeated moments in between. If you stand on the quay on a clear night and look hard enough, perhaps you will see the creature moving where the moonlight thickens, pausing, listening for the whistle. Perhaps you will hear, very faint, the village humming its half-song. The harbor is not the only place this happens. Stories like this gather like shells and are carried inland by travelers, told at hearths and shared with neighbors. They travel not by spectacle, but by being spoken softly, again and again. There are other quiet things to be said at the edges of this story. That kindness is a slow thing and must be practiced. That some beings belong to wide places and must be allowed to learn the world. That stewardship sometimes asks us to open our hands so that another may grow. They were tended, the tale insists, in the careful watch of a community and by keepers who respected the creature's need for the open sea. As you fold this legend back over itself, remember the small rituals that made the difference. Feeding at dusk, the single whistle, the fingers smoothing the nest. Let them be a map you keep in the palm of your mind. Let the lullaby sit in your throat and settle your shoulders. Sleep, and let the moon keep watch. Sleep, the night remembers you. Now sleep, child, under the eternal moonlight, and dream of steady hands and returning tides. There are other quiet stories to keep you company, waiting by the hearth for the next soft hour.